And in this video, we'll kind of put it back together. Here goes. So it's been a few days and I've cleaned up and painted the axle. And one way so let's back up a little bit. So it's been a few days. We took this axle apart. It had this lock nut on there that was peened. All the threads are jacked up. The splines on the hub weren't really engaged right, so this side was damaged. This side looked to be pretty much virgin, but it wouldn't come off. Had good threads, the key wasn't sheared, the splines were okay. When we finally got this off here, because I was going to replace the bearings, seals, etc., it actually, the force popped this bearing race and bearing axle out of this side. So based on all that, I've decided to go with a one-piece rear axle, and that will eliminate this axle flange and tapered axle splines, which is apparently a weak point on these AMC-20s. I sent back the bearings and races and seals I already had, so it wasn't a whole lot more money to go ahead and get the whole kit. So now we need to get this side bearing and axle out of there. And so what I noticed is it looks like this center pin carrier is kind of slotted, and if I put this axle back in and get it back engaged in the splines, I think I can tap on that and it will actually push this axle out. And this is, pretty much jacked up anyway. It starts to move that bearing out of there. Here we go. What I ended up purchasing was an RT off-road one-piece axle kit for these AMC-20 axles. So basically we're going to follow the instructions and install new ones. First off, we need to get these original inner axle seals out. It still has some gear oil and muck behind it. To start off with, we have a new seal to go in. Pretty much identical to the old one. I have a race and seal installation tool. I'm not sure where the rest of it went, but it'll help us push on that and get it in there square. Theoretically, the metal interference will make a seal or this piece of rubber on the outside. I didn't really seem to have any RTV that wasn't jacked up, but I did have some of this Loctite 574, which is a seal making compound, which does not appear to be solid. So we'll just dab a little of that on there. This is probably way overkill for this application. And the spring goes to the oil side. But you probably already knew that. So I put a little bit of grease on the seal just so we don't rip it. So we have the seal, this seal installed. Next is a bearing spacer, which is this bad boy right here. So that goes in. And there's a lip, kind of holds that, lets it stop. So once that in there, next up is our Timken bearing, which it truly is a Timken bearing. So you put it in with the inner race of the bearing protruding more on one side. It goes towards the center of the axle, towards the diff. Pop it in there, and it next we want to measure the distance this bearing is protruding from this flange of the axle. I've seen people pile up feeler gauges and kind of feel it by hand, but I have some calipers or a dial caliper, so we will use that function, try to get it level-ish, measure it that way. So you want the bearing to stick out 20 thousandths to 60 thousandths beyond the axle housing end. If more than that, we need to take that spacer apart and grind it down until it fits. So by using the calipers, I'm kind of getting conflicting results here. There I'm about 75 thousandths. Over on this side, I'm about 50 thousandths. Which is a little bit disconcerting because that means this is not square. So let me work on cleaning this up and making sure all this stuff is in there correctly. Cleaning that off is only going to make the clearance larger. I don't know, we are up here on top, we're like 70, down here we're like 60. Feel like, unless something's not in there all the way, probably need to clearance that spacer a little bit. So before I get too far, I've marked the left and right axle shafts. It comes with new wheel studs, which are really just bolts. So recommends that you install these and torque them to around 70 foot-pounds and lock, well, use some sort of thread locking compound. This is what we're using. These studs are not pressed in. Guess it really doesn't matter. Makes it a little easier if you need to replace one. But what I don't know is if we can get these in after the axles in the vehicle. My assumption is probably not. So we'll go ahead and get these installed. So I have my torque wrench set to 70 pound-feet. I have it clamped with wood in the vise so it doesn't scratch the axles. Just need to repeat that a few more times. So this measures about 615. I want to take it down to about 600 thousandths, just to be sure I'm inside that tolerance of protrusion from the axle. Close enough. Okay, so I'm at work where I have a press to press these bearings on. Instructions call for this reuse your old cover, but they provided a new one. The seal housing with the seal, a little bit of grease on it, and then your cleaned up backing plate. Be sure to put this on the correct direction because I just about screwed up. And then that'll slide in like that, pretty much like this, and then this bearing goes on with the groove to the backing plate side. Got an 1.25 inch pipe coupling on there as our bearing tool. Double check one last time. This is facing the right way. This looks to be in there the right way. So that's tight. Now the spacer holds it all together. Got the little spacer in there that I trimmed down slightly, so our depth should be right. There's some grease on this inner seal. I had previously packed the wheel bearing. Just jam a little more in there. This will be the last time we see it. Okay, I have some RTV. Just apply a little layer on this face. Next, well, actually I'm going to put just a little bit down here on the brake backing plate on the opposite side, just in case we miss something. Okay, here goes. Okay, feels like that's slid into the differential. Now we just need to orient all this stuff correctly here. Line up our holes. Go ahead and get a bolt through all this mess. Then reusing the hardware, the nuts and lock washers. All right, so there's one axle in the hole. And what you hear turning is the spider gears turning, but turns easy enough. Doesn't feel like there's any play in it, so we'll repeat this on the other side. Somewhere around here I have a new pinion seal to go in here because this thing is nasty. Obviously has been leaking. have an 1.1" socket, which appears to fit, so let's see if this will come off. Well, that was incredibly easy. There we go. Let me get all this cleaned up. I'm going to clean up that yoke as much as it was going to clean up. Let's go ahead and get this seal out of here. This is the part number for the new seal. I held that long enough. See if that looks right, which it does. I don't really have anything large and round enough to drive this in, so we'll just try tapping it around the edges. There's a little bit of staining on here, but there's no real groove, so I think we'll be all right. I'll just add a little bit of grease along here so it doesn't tear the seal. And this should go on in any orientation. Also came with a new nut, which is larger than the original one. Closest thing I have to fit is a 30mm. Whoa, Nelly. That ends up being a little bit too tight. So I should probably go do a little bit of research, see if there's some like drag limit we're looking for on that, because if I tighten it all the way down, it locks it up. So apparently this differential has a crush sleeve, and that's how you set a bunch of stuff in this differential, but also set the preload on the bearings. So it called for 17 to 25 inch-pounds. So I have this inch-pound torque wrench that I've never actually used for anything. So this will be its maiden voyage. I had to adapt up to get the socket to fit, so we'll just spin it and see how much drag is on it. So it looks like we have, we ended up with about 20. So let's try that one more time. $17. Just close to 20. I feel like I want to tap this just a little more. See, and that's almost too much. We ended up with close to 20. I'm going to leave that alone. While we're in this vicinity, we might as well go ahead and cover up the rear differential. Probably rake out the rest of this oil that's in there if there's any chunks. But I have this gasket, which is supposed to be the correct part number, and I've cleaned up and painted the cover. So there's kind of an inset little ring around here. It's just supposed to fit up into. Which I think that'll work. What was on there had cork and paper, so I'm not sure what's correct. So we're just going to try the straight up cork. According to the part number, AMC with 12 bolt covers 61 to 83. So I'm not sure what else it would be. So I think I'll use a little bit torn about this, but I think I'll go ahead and add a little bit of RTV around this ring just to keep the gasket in place and provide a little extra sealing cushion. So we'll give it a rest for a minute and let that sort of stick itself. It's tacked up for a few minutes. Go ahead and put a little bit of RTV on here. I know technically it's probably not required, but let's give it that little extra boost. You know, most of the leakage will be at the bottom, so we'll make sure that's covered. Cleaned everything out of here. I think this was the orientation it was in. So I looked in the manual I have, and it said the torque for this cover was 170 inch-pounds, so we'll see what that looks like. We'll just go around. It said axle cover, so I'm assuming this is what they're talking about. So try not to make this video too long where people don't watch any of it or skip through all of it. We'll start working on the brakes next time and get the rest of this axle put back together in the frame. Thanks for watching. See you next time.